Hello, legends. So, breathwork. This is the Lego piece in my spiritual journey that I will hold my hand up and say I think I've been overlooking. Uh, Perhaps bar the fact that I do like to go for a jog every morning. I have got the wonderful Anthony Abbagnano. He's going to kill me now for slaughtering that pronunciation. But Anthony's come on the show. He's the world's leading pioneer in this field, and let's get into it and let's see what Anthony's got to advise us. Anthony, how are you?
Thanks for having me here, Chris. I'm great, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, absolutely wonderful to have you on the show. I didn't slaughter the pronunciation too badly.
I'll reply to that off screen.
Yeah,
No, no, you're all right. You're good.
yes, no, wonderful. Italian, I'm assuming.
That's right. I'm half Italian. Yeah,
Yes, yes, Roger, Roger.
and I sound English, but I've actually lived in Italy longer than I ever did in England. So
Which part of Italy?
I'm in Tuscany now. We live in Tuscany. We have a retreat center, and we have a project here to regenerate a large piece of land and the town above us as well, which has been an ex-mining town and it's empty. So we're generating interest in people are interested in breath work and the work that I do that are moving here and buying houses in the village. And it's a fascinating project. It'll last longer than my lifetime, that's for sure.
Brilliant, brilliant. Anthony, as you probably heard me say there in the introduction, I've been getting my kind of hermetic seal in over the years. It's taken me a long time. I'm very much. I think I self medicate childhood trauma. I guess you or complex trauma. I think it's probably
Yeah.
more accurate. I have worked really hard to get on top of the addictions. I mean, they would have killed me otherwise. As things as silly as even caffeine, a cup of tea, I'll just go full on down that route, or it will be chocolate in the eve. There's all. Anyway, my point is, I I wanted to know what it would be like to be firing, to be good, to be in spirit, you could say, to have this enlightenment, to be full of the light that Scripture talks about. And gosh, I'll say I'm pretty much almost there. I do the things, I moderate exercise every day, sauna, cold plunge, or hot shower, cold shower. I eat a pH neutral diet. Not. I mean, it's delicious and I love it. It's not like a punishment or anything. And yada yada yada. I feel like I've done, a good job. No doubt there'll be slipbacks, but the one thing though that I haven't focused on almost at all is the breath work. And I want to ask you, why am I missing, what am I missing out on?
That's a big it's a big issue. You're in a serious condition. Um, with all the excellence that you have demonstrated in your life, not just by the things that you've accomplished in the outer world, but also in your inner world to have met addiction and come through the other side. And to stay alert and watchful and mindful about not sliding down that slippery slope again. I almost want to be cheeky and invite you to get addicted to your breath, because um, we are we can't do without it. We are absolutely dependent on it. And I think that, to me, and you mentioned the word spirit, that's exactly what the breath is. And that's why we call it getting inspired, is because we're bringing in spirit. So when we inspire consciously, we're consciously embracing, you could say, a higher power. And the consequences of, obviously, if we don't embrace a higher power, how can we expect a higher power to help us? So I know in your journey through addiction, you've probably done that just from the few words you've said. You've chosen to embrace the aid and support of a higher power. And I think that the breath is a complete paradox. It's something we don't even have to think about ever. People won't, unless they lose it, then they'll think they don't have enough. You yourself, you're about to go on a big climb and you'll be negotiating that for yourself. But it is the most fundamental thing in our lives. And we step over it all the time in our effort to reach the peak of something, to reach the peak of our next accomplishment. But we do forget that we're going to be breathing along the way. And actually, my own experience with breath, I first discovered it when I was 8 years old, the power of the breath. And I would say even now, I'm 71 as of yesterday, so that makes it, how many years is that? 63 years of discovery and inquiry into the breath. And I feel like I know that much about one breath. That's how massive a subject this is. And to think of the fact that we don't reflect on it at all is astounding. So I'm a student. I'm not a professional. I'm a student, and I always will be, of this extraordinary thing. Even one breath, just one cycle of inhaling and exhaling is worthy of a lifetime of reflection and study. So it gives some sense of proportion. It's dramatic. It's a dramatic element, and that we keep turning away from.
Yes, you touched on something then. I read the book Gaia Theory many years ago now, and it enlightened me as this, indoctrinated matrix person that not been long out the military, that everything's connected. Traditional science or traditional way of looking things is that rock is a rock and that tree's a tree and we're great because we're the humans and we dominate it. And it's like, no. And to take that further, if we're going to buy into the concept that there's the one, the all, the everything, universe, God, spirit, whatever we're going to call that,
Yeah.
and we are the microcosm of the macro or holistic representation of the bigger picture, then symbiotically we connect to everything via our breath, don't we? That's it. I'm connected to that tree in the garden right now as we speak, because as I breathe out, it breathes in and then it breathes out.
Yeah.
Now, if I walked into a pub and told everyone, hey guys, I'm a tree, well, half of me is that people would look at you like you were absolutely insane, but the truth appears to be madness to people that haven't opened their eyes to had their eyes open. Am I sort of hitting a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. There's such a ridiculousness about the obviousness that we manage to avoid noticing. It's such an indicator of the human condition, and how easy it is for us to miss the point. And I think you just nailed it there. If you walk into a pub and you say you're a tree, they're going to think you're nutballs. But it's true. And another thing, for example, argon, and a gas that's in every breath we breathe, never goes away. We're recycling argon that the Buddha breathed, that Jesus breathed, that Hitler breathed. We're connected to all of that. it's like we're drinking from the same well. And I think what that helps me understand, really where that takes me, is to the power of forgiveness. That, when we say I am you and I am me, and those little mantras and cliches that people use, but it begins to become normal, this awareness that actually, yes, we are connected. And so that shines such a sharp, perhaps harsh light on the way the world works, because we really act as if we're disconnected. And especially from the consequences we create in other people's hearts and their minds and their lives.
Anthony, we will come on and tell your story, and we're going to very much promote your book, or we're certainly going to give it some exposure. I just want to touch on something that's quite important, and it's kind of what we talk about a lot on this channel, and that is, I get a lot of, there's this age-old argument, isn't there? Is there more evil in the world now than there was, say, 100 years ago, than, say, 10,000 years ago, yada, yada, yada. And when you look out, I mean, I did a live podcast last night, and I was trying to sum up the absolute lunacy of letting corporate millionaire and billionaires become presidents, and then talk about whether they're going to take their people to bomb to death the men, women and children in another country as though it's like a computer game. Yeah. It's insanity. And a lot of people realize this, and off the back of what I call it the medical nonsense that we've all just been through. Yeah. And then you've got, the financial system, which is all set up against us. Education is a lie. The food industry is a massive lie. The Medicare and the pharmaceutical is just so. I don't think people understand how the evil beyond belief. These are individuals that do not care about you. They care about their cliquey club. Call it new world order, whatever it might be. And people say, yeah, Chris, but what can we do? Are you going to get your military friends together and take? And my answer, Anthony, is, well, what have you done today? We're all connected. What have you done to raise the energy? Did you go out the door smiling? Did you say hello to the people that you meet? They might have been going home to contemplate suicide, and a quick hiya, you okay, might raise their spirit. They go home, pick up the phone to an old friend they haven't chatted for. They're like, wow, my friend called me out the blue. Have you done breath work? Have you done the hot shower, cold shower? Have you meditated? What have you done to do your part of the bargain? And I've seen enough of this now, Anthony, to know that a lot of people, they're just manifesting their trauma. They don't really want to do anything. They just want other people to acknowledge that they're in pain, that the world's in pain, and it's everybody else's fault. And I'm not judging people here. This would have been me at one time in my life. Right? Mm. And that's why I think these chats are invaluable. Is I see breath work is a crucial factor. If you want a better planet, this is something that I think we need to not only understand but put into practice. Again, am I sort of making sense?
Yeah, you're nailing it. I first of all, just to give a quick rundown on what breath work is, 50% of breath work is being aware of your breath, and then and choosing to be aware of your breath. And then the other 50% is discovering different breath styles that create different effects, from hacking your nervous system longevity, modulating your moods, developing energy, discharging energy, and there are all kinds of knobs and switches on this dashboard we call breath. And then there's the conscious connected breath. And the reason I wanted to come to this, because this is really the big kahuna of breathwork, which is what has become so popular now in the world and is actually being commodified, just like medicine, just like food, just like yoga. It's going down the same road, and there are some unscrupulous offerings that are out there. But a conscious connected breath is particularly appropriate to bring into the picture now, because you mentioned people are recreating their trauma and they're sitting in victimhood. And we're in a world trauma. We're under trauma. We're under the stress of trauma all the time because of the ridiculous illness that everybody supposedly had, and also is wanted to be that way. The grand design is to keep us under that kind of stress. So I think the beauty of the conscious connected breath is that it actually stops us thinking the same way. And one of the problems that I see in the world is that there's a desperate need for a different conversation to take place. And yet, what I do see happening is that people, when they're upset or activated or threatened by this trauma force that exists in the world today, we tend to fall into opposition of it. And I think what we need to be aware of is when we give opposition to something that's existent in the world, we need to be really careful, because if we're not super mindful about what we're saying and where we're going with this, if it's motivated by any sense of adrenaline inside us, we're going to contribute to the conversation. We're going to contribute to the polarization. Unconsciously, we're going to fall into the argument. And yet we actually need to create a different conversation. And that's not to say protest doesn't work. I'm not saying it's a yes and more than a yes but for me. But what I see in the world is that the powers that are in control use their opposition as the fuel to strengthen their point of view and to strengthen the pitch that they make out there in the world, and to make things just get worse. So there have been a few people in the world, in world history, that have created new conversations, and we can probably count them on one or two hands, like Jesus or Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi. And when you consider that these people did this not by reaction, they did it not even by doing as much as by being someone who is so inspiring that other people gravitate towards it. And that kind of leadership is happening all the time with every person that exists on the world and in the world. And what I'm saying is, if you're listening to this, you are a leader. You might not think so. When I talk to a group of people and I say, hey, who feels like they're a leader here? And like 3 people put up their hand out of 25, or 6 people out of 100. We're leading all the time. And what you just mentioned about those small acts of kindness, that word that you might have not bothered to give, but might actually save someone's life. Are we willing to become accustomed to that being the way we live? Because everybody's watching you all the time. When you give the change to the cashier, or when you talk to the taxi driver, or when you see someone waiting to cross the road who might need support, these are all opportunities for us to redescribe what normal is. But in this Western world, especially, we forget all of that, right? Because we're in a hurry to get to where we need to go, and we forget about the kindness. We listen to those 60,000 thoughts a day that the Buddhists say that we have, and they're very repetitive. Really, we're only thinking about 10 things, just with different little stories we're telling ourselves. So bringing it back to the breath, the power of that conscious connected breath is that physiologically, scientifically, what it's doing is it's increasing oxygen flow in our bloodstream, but it's actually slowing down the oxygen flow to our prefrontal cortex. So our whole method of reasoning, our normal thought processes actually slow down. And then we get to ask ourselves, well, what else might I become aware of if I don't think so fast, or if I don't think so much? What else, what other kinds of awareness do I have other than thinking? What is it that might exist in between thought, in those gaps? What is it that's going on in those gaps between? We'll never find out because we fill them all the time. So this act of consciously choosing to breathe, to slow down the way we rationalize and through life, and to slow down the stories that we tell ourselves for being the way we are and saying the things we do, there's a possibility for something new to happen. And that's the pivotal power of breath. And I've seen some extraordinary shifts in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Life's changed. It actually happened in a water breathe we were doing on Wednesday. I was sitting giving a private session to a lady who's 75 years old. She's a brilliant woman. She's a filmmaker. She's done a lot of good for the world. She's lived in a conscious community for many years. And she said, the way I was held in the water while I was breathing, I've waited for that for over 70 years. My parents didn't give me that. My family didn't give me that. Something has happened that's explained my whole life to me. I'm covered in goosebumps as I say this because it was so moving to hear that this woman can die in peace now. Something's been put back that was taken away. And she's already doing good work in the world. But now every person she meets is going to get the benefit of the risk that she took to take a few breaths, let herself be held in the water, and open her mind to something that the brain probably wouldn't have allowed her to access otherwise. So this is the power of breath, and this is an example of breath and water, for example. But this is the power of the breath. This is how it can change. And when you're 74 years old, you're pretty rigid. You're pretty in your groove. You've got your cycles. You've got your repetitive behavior. But the breath can even change that in just 25 minutes. She was in the water. So
Anthony, you mentioned earlier this came to you at a young age. I kind of like these profound sort of stories. Can you tell us a bit more about how it came to be?
yeah, for sure. I was at boarding school. I was at boarding school at 7 years old, and my parents were determined to offer me the things that they couldn't have. So I was very privileged in that sense, and I hated it. I couldn't stand being away from my family. I was miserable. I cried myself to sleep every night. It was just the wrong place. I wasn't meant to be there. But when I was 8, and being half Italian, and this is in like the early 60s, it didn't guarantee you popularity. I got called all kinds of names like grease wop and spaghetti and all those things, but not kindly. It was a nasty environment in an upper class British boarding school. And I was just miserable. And then one guy came up to me one day with a paper bag and he said, breathe into this 20 times, 20 big breaths. So I took 20 big breaths, and then he squeezed me from behind and squeezed my chest and said, now do one big exhale. So I let out an exhale, and then he put me down to the ground, And honestly, I took that risk with this kid because I wanted to be liked. I thought, oh God, someone's going to be nice to me. What happened when I laid on the ground was that I saw God. I know it might sound ridiculous, but I think the closest way of describing it would be how people report an NDE, a near-death experience. I was so struck by the complexity, by the beauty, by the hugeness, by the magnificence, by God, by spirit, that when I look back at this miserable life that I was living, it seemed like minuscule in comparison to the vastness and the magnificence that I was being blessed with in that moment. And it changed my life. And, from then on, the breath to me became a holy experience. And I went through a Church of England school, and then I got married in the Catholic Church, and I took instruction in order to be married. And so I went through all these formal different, I've explored Buddhism, I've explored Hinduism, I've explored not as much, but Islam. I, but it's my work, right? Because I think I'm called SBNO, spiritual but not religious, SBNR. But I think there's value in all of them. But my experience as a child was that the dogma that was being imposed upon me is not dissimilar than the dogma that's being imposed upon us now, in the world. So it just seemed like ridiculously small. This is, God is bigger than one religion. And so I think that's when my spiritual opening happened, when I was that young. And there were times that I really tried to forsake it and push it away because I was a misfit, and it's not easy being a misfit. But now I'm really grateful. I'm grateful for the schooling. I'm grateful it's helped me become a good communicator. I'm grateful for the suffering, and I'm grateful for the breath because, my gosh, it saved my life so many times.
Yes, I think organized religion just seems to be set up to keep people from the truth.
Yeah.
What does it say? Isn't it the opening of Genesis? It says in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God.
Yeah.
The Word was good. Um,
Yeah.
and what is the Word? It's breath, isn't it? Over the voice box. So
Yeah.
it's frequency and vibration. I guess.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm fascinated. Obviously, we're going to come on and talk about the different techniques and what do they achieve, or perhaps what do they cure. But a question comes to mind. I think it's quite fascinating. What sort of people are coming to see you?
Um, I think mostly people who are really ready for change, people who have understood, the majority of people who have understood that this isn't it. And if I keep believing this is it, I'm going to be in regret the older I get. And that change might be catalyzed by some kind of crisis or a death or a loss in the family, or it could just be a big depression, high anxiety, things are not working in life, suicidal ideation, addiction, um, all traumatic conditions. And then now, because this is kind of fun for me as I come to this part of my hero's journey, because I was born into, I was, when I left school, I went into the corporate world, and it was another miserable existence. But now I'm fortunate enough to be able to be working with a lot of CEOs and founder CEOs, and I'm going to America next week to speak at a very big human resources conference. And what I love about that saying, toe in the door or foot in the door, what I love about the breath is that you could take it anywhere. Right now at Alchemy, we're taking it into the police force, into hospitals, into prisons, and corporate for me is the kind of the big kahuna, because if we can get breath work into the corporate space, the quality of leadership is going to shift, and people won't even realize that they're doing it in a way. It's so valuable in any environment where the team is going to make the dream. It helps people communicate. It helps marriages become richer and deeper and more sustainable. Any relationship, if you breathe together, you will accomplish a state of clarity and care and compassion that we don't give ourselves the chance to experience in normal life. We don't have time for it. When you're passing by that fellow who's sitting in his own urine with a blanket on him and a little paper cup, that's a turnoff in our normal mindset. Like, I've got to stay away from that. I might get contaminated. That's not how the world works, it's not. Why is it that it becomes more and more important for us to go into nature? Because nature is really the only thing left that does work. And everything else is a compromise. Everything that humans have touched is getting ruined. We're the worst part of the whole food chain. So this is forgivable. Don't get me wrong. And I think the most important thing that we can do to reclaim our agency, in other words, our empowerment in this shit show that we're in, is to take one breath. In fact, you could say the definition of emotional intelligence is the ability to take one breath when you don't want to. And that's where it all begins. That's where you are making a choice in a very choiceless environment. And the act of making that choice is what can change everything. So that's how significant one breath can be, because even, like say you're in that argument, you're in that escalating situation and you're feeling the adrenaline come up. And let's remember, it takes just a second for adrenaline to come up, but it takes a long while for it to come back down again. So when you feel that escalation, that tingling, that tension in your belly or whatever it is, and you're no longer listening to that person, you're just thinking about what you're going to get them back with. And that it's just going to make it worse. Ever been there? It's not going to help. But by George, I'm going to be righteous and say it anyway because I want to be right. That's the time to take the breath. And just consider, maybe you need another 10 breaths. And just consider and be with that physical experience that you're having, be in your body, because your body is sending you messages that your brain is not listening to. So wake up, use that breath for your own awakening, and keep waking up with each chosen breath that you make. And as you do that as a practice in your life, then you become equipped, you become robust, you become resilient, and you develop equanimity. You develop the ability to be in the witness in any given situation. And that means before you join the fray, and before you slip into becoming a part of the problem, you can make a conscious choice about what would a solution look like and how could I best serve that.
Incredible. And so something that comes to mind there is when you embrace practices like this, I think it hones your ethical choices and your outlook on life. I don't envisage Donald Trump doing breath work in the morning. I might be wrong, but I would imagine it's part of a very special journey. When you do breath work, because you realize the importance of investing in yourself in a way that's outside of the mainstream, unfortunately, it's also hard then to go and commit an environmental crime, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or to be horrible to someone on the internet, or to go and steal some, or make a decision at work that you know is going to destroy a community or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, the breath is a tool. So yeah, a knife is a tool and a screwdriver is a tool and the breath is a tool. It just happens to be divinely provided. It's referred to 43 times in the Bible as a supernatural force. It's mentioned in the Quran and in the Kabbalah as well, and always as a supernatural force. That's how Muhammad got born, because of the breath upon his mother's chest. So for those of us that were raised in England with the Church of England or a Catholic culture, it makes one wonder what Immaculate Conception really was. If the Muslims see that as the Immaculate Conception of Muhammad. So yes, this is a serious subject. I'm an evangelist. I mean, I can talk for hours about this, but that choice is available right now.
Yes. And Anthony, I just want to ask you something. This is more of a personal thing, but I go through very different phases in weight. Primarily, I love running, and I get a sort of satisfaction really from being 55 years old and being a better runner at 55 than I was a 19-year-old commando. I think that's something it's not about being pride or ego or anything like that. I like to go out and run, and I listen to music, and it's great. And when I get back, I've put the sauna on, so it's all ready for when I get back, and I go and sit in the sauna and I listen to some house music or I listen to some sort of script, some interpretation of scripture or something that, it is me time is what I'm trying to say. But sometimes I'm sat there on my sauna bench and I think, Chris, breathe. Now, here's the thing. It physically feels so much better to breathe when I've lost 2 stone in weight, which I can do in 6 weeks. I can, I've been known to drink a few beers and eat a few pizzas and really let my spiritual battle drift. I was in a rowing boat, for example, for 50 days, and we just ate dehydrated rubbish. It was, washed it down with some rum and coke when we got to Barbados. So what I'm getting at is, I'm 10.5 stone now, so I'm not really far off the weight I was when I was 19 years old. And it feels better to breathe now. And I wondered if this is a thing that people recognize, or is that just me?
Well, first of all, it's a great way to lose weight, to breathe consciously. And it's also, I think, the more in shape you are, the more you're going to appreciate it. And it's also the most toxins are excreted from your body through your breath. So I think those 3 things are the 3 legs of the table physiologically that, they support the platform upon which we can then take off from to find out more things, to inquire about more things. So I think your experience of, especially you've been for a run, you're in the sauna, you're taking that breath, and gosh, how can it not be a breath of gratitude after you've celebrated life that way? You're dancing with life out there as you run. You're 55 years old. You've lost weight. You're in the sauna. You're in your spiritual groove. You're playing with the dance. You're dancing with life. Your dance partner is life itself. And actually, when you're breathing, your dance partner is the divine. So, how can it not feel good?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm I can't emphasize enough to people. I used to be chronically unhealthy, unwell, and this was as a member of the elite armed forces. I would get ill, oh, typically 3 times a year. I'd have 2 colds a year, and of course back then we blamed that on other people have
Yeah.
made it. And then I'd get some form of severe flu or glandular fever or et cetera, et cetera. And long story short, I met a fantastic doctor called Dr. Robert Young. And I also got hooked up with one of his proteges. He put my blood on an electric microscope and physically showed me on a big TV screen what was going on in my blood. And he pointed to this big white fluffy thing that drifted past like a sort of alien. And he said, what did you have to eat last night? And I was a support worker at the time in learning disabilities, and I was at a client's house, and I just wolfed down a bowl of the client's shreddies, horrible refined carbohydrate, salty sugar snack with dairy on top of it, and he said, "Yep, that'll do it." He said, "That's acid, Chris. That what you're just seeing float. That you." And anyway, it was revolutionary to me, as it probably is to people listening. I had never heard of this concept that our fragile cells have a pH balance, and that if we muck around with it, we're heading for ill health. And because I never knew this in my life, this is why I kept getting ill. My dietary choices were abysmal. I was living on sugar, basically, carbohydrate, turned to glucose in my blood. My cells were saying, look, I can't take any more of this acid. This is why I keep making you ill, Chris, to kind of detox it. And so I'm fortunate. I haven't been ill for 23 years now, which is why I don't know if chuckle is the right word, but during the recent nonsense, I'm like, they're not telling you the truth, folks. I'm sorry. They're just not telling you. Now, oxygenating the blood, I believe, is a good way to alkalize yourself.
It is. Yeah. Yeah, you'll raise your alkaline level, and of course it's aerobic. So you're discouraging the nasty pathogens as you do it, as you oxygenate. And then, I spoke earlier about the oxygen increasing in the bloodstream, but actually decreasing in the frontal lobe. But there are ways then with breath tricks like breath holding that you take the oxygen boost in your bloodstream and then you can export it into the frontal lobe as well. So it can be used for more processing power, not just slowing down our processing power. And you, as a runner and an athlete, you I'm sure are familiar with high altitude training and the importance of underbreathing too. It's not all about the more I do it, the better it gets. There are times, especially when you're exerting physical energy and to maintain stamina, that you should breathe through the nose and learn to breathe with a little less breath than you need, which is also very useful as a practice for people who have asthma, to just breathe up to 30 or 40% of your capacity, and for 20 minutes to breathe in that range from 0 to 40%. And what you're doing essentially is learning to make do, but you're also learning that you can do it, and therefore it doesn't become threatening. So the whole other part of the nervous system that gets stressed and contracts when you feel an asthma attack coming on doesn't kick into gear so readily because you have a practice in place. And I think all of these things, because a lot of people say, okay, what should I do if I'm anxious? Or what should I do if I'm depressed? And there is a breath for each of these things that we can use. But the best time to put these practices into place is when you don't have the symptom that you want to reverse engineer. Because I've said a lot there, but the breath is something that we can use to reverse engineer the condition that we're experiencing, psychosomatically or in the nervous system. So that means that if I'm anxious, I'm normally breathing a short breath. And you've noticed also when you're anxious that your range of options diminishes, right? You become more and more myopic until if you're in high anxiety or panic, you can't even do anything. You're just in that moment of disaster. So you might know intellectually that it's important to breathe, but you just can't muster up. You don't have a practice in place. If you learn how to breathe a calming breath before you need it, it will be your default that you go to. So I know you said you spent time on a boat. I'm a yacht master and I have lived on a sailing boat for many years. I don't anymore, but so much can go wrong on a boat. It's moving all the time. You've got passengers or people on with you. There are a lot of responsibilities for a skipper on a boat. If a squall comes or you hit a rock or the sail breaks or, there are so many different things that can go wrong. We're taught to go like a first responder or a fire person would. We're taught to go through a sequence of events if a disaster happens. And we adapt the sequence according to what the disaster is. And we practice it, we practice it, we practice it. So when it happens, when the anchor slips and you're heading for the rocks in a 40-mile-an-hour wind, you know you have a sequence of events. So you don't go into panic, you just follow your sequence. And it's the same thing with our breath. The more we develop our breath practices now, when we need to call upon them, they will be there for us. So what I'm saying is make breath your best friend because it's the fuel you need to do anything, but you can do it a lot better when you use it consciously. And that's from being an athlete to learning how to calm down, learning how to get excited and empowered and more punchy, how to make love. All of these things are informed by the breath. Communication skills, public speaking, management skills, team building skills, everything, wife, husband skills, they all can be improved with conscious breathing.
Anthony, can we obviously I'd encourage people to get in contact with you to find out more about your retreat, which sounds fascinating and great fun and enlightening. And also to read your book. I've just been showing it on my other screen over there. There we are, folks. Outer Chaos, Inner Calm. That's just such a great cover and such a great title. Are you able, though, without obviously giving everything away, to just could you outline some types of breath or the main groups of work that you do or encourage people to employ?
Yeah, of course, and I'm happy to give them away. That's the breath isn't mine. I'm just borrowing it. We're all borrowing it. We always have to give it back. So I'm not proprietor. I haven't named a breath work the Anthony method. I'm not interested in that. Yeah, here are some. I think here's breath 101. Notice how you're breathing in any given moment. Start to keep mental notes or written notes about a breath pattern you have when you first wake up in the morning, or when you're making love, or when you're in the supermarket queue and there's an old man in front of you who's fiddling with 3 penny pieces and taking his time and you're late for an appointment. How are you breathing? How are you breathing when you're driving on the motorway a little too fast? How are you breathing when you're driving at a safe speed? How are you breathing when you're angry? How are you breathing when you're sad? Just start to create a catalog of how you're breathing in given circumstances. And all of these breath styles actually become the key that you can employ if you want to recreate that condition. So I think one perhaps pertinent thing that seems to be going on in the world is a sexual thing. And I think I'm just going to take the risk and say it for people who have difficulty with premature ejaculation, for example, or if you're a man or a woman and you want to make an orgasmic experience more of a whole body experience, indeed more of a spiritual experience than just, loin lust or friction fancy, we'll call it, use your breath. Breathe a slow, calm breath as you feel any rise in the crescendo, and you will have command over how that crescendo does develop. If you're able to breathe actually even during an orgasm, that's an ecstatic place to be. It's a challenge because there's a natural contraction with an orgasm. But likewise, if you're crying, you'll notice that when we sob, we're like we do that. I encourage you to learn to breathe a level, steady breath into that emotion that you're feeling, because there's almost an orgasmic experience in that as well. Being with the emotion, that strength of emotion, and maintaining your breath at the same time. And what happens? What happens is that you can feel the emotion fully, but you can also witness it at the same time. And that's really the central part of our teachings at Alchemy. And really what the book is about learning to transform this outer mess into a center point, into a still point inside that then turns things around. So instead of being affected by the world around you, you actually begin to affect the world around you. And so the book is an invitation into an inner journey. You could call it your inner workout, if you will, which is about understanding where you've come from and the conditions that have made you who you are, but regaining some choices that you lost along the way and saying, well, yeah, I want to change that, but I've never been able to. I want to stop smoking. I want to lose weight. I want to stop my addiction. I want to grow into a better father or a parent or a husband or a wife. This journey that we go on is about building that ability, building agency. Now, my big picture here is 10 to the power of 9. That's my motto. And what that means is if I can get 10 of you to uplift your consciousness and you're inspired enough to get 10 other people to do that, each of you, and you can inspire them enough to do it again. And if we do that 9 times, we've reached 1 billion people. When we've reached 1 billion people, we can create a different conversation that I mentioned earlier on. We can go to Big Pharma and say, hey, we've got 250 million people that have a chronic illness, but they don't want to pay $6,000 a month for their medicine. We're interested in taking bids. So we can create a new conversation where Big Pharma can move forward and say, yeah, I want your business. I'm going to insure you for alternative therapies, not just medications. We can actually begin to create changes in the world because we become powerful enough and influence that we can say what the conversation should be. We don't have to join other people's anymore. And that's really what this book is about, is supporting you becoming an agent of change in this mess that we live in. And the way you're going to become an agent of change is by creating your own agency, by becoming a creative being, one that can make choices. And it all starts with one breath. That one breath is how it begins.
So we should mention, Anthony, Wim Hof, or is that something you're fed up with hearing about?
No, not at all. No, I I love what he does. I love what he does. I'm friends with his daughter. I don't know Wim very well, but um, I think he's a great man. He's helped a lot of people. Um, I wouldn't like I said, I wouldn't brand a breath under my own name, but I think that's part of his charm, is his brazen approach to life that kind of really clears out the cobwebs. And so I have great admiration for him. The Wim Hof method is one style of breath. Actually, it's an ancient style of breath that he's called the Wim Hof method. It's an ancient Tibetan style of breath, but it's a very empowering breath, and it's the kind of breath you want to use if you need to meet resistance. If you're going to take an approach of beating resistance with persistence, the Wim Hof breath is a fantastic breath to use. Um, in my book, I look at resistance, and I don't think that resistance is always something to be beaten. Sometimes resistance is something to be uh, um, alchemized, something that we can consider as a friend, not just as an enemy. It helps us stopping putting our hands into the fire, if there's a fire. So let's not throw out the benefits with just because we're a little bit scared of the negative aspects. But Wim Hof he's got millions of people breathing. So any one of my colleagues that have done that, I'm like right there with them. Do it. Go for it.
Yeah, they could call it the Instagram method, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
It's
it's, you know what? It's got a lot of people who would have thought only sissies breathing. And I train a lot of people that have become trainers in the Wim Hof method. I'm very grateful to him. He keeps sending me people that want to study with me because they want to go deeper. It's because the work I do is more about the inner journey. So be watchful in the breathwork world. There's a lot of junk out there. There's a lot of cheap work that's about peak experience and, get high. And you can get high using your breath. But really, to me, the question is, what about uplifting your whole life, not just the times that you sit down and breathe? So, what is it that you're doing in between your breath sessions that you can gather data, wisdom, divine guidance from your breathwork session? How can you actually make it work in your life? And then that's how we're really going to make some big changes here.
Are you familiar with the Aerofit?
Is that the one, not the brand, but I'm familiar with the concept where you can dial in your
Yeah.
exhale and then yeah. Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, I
Brilliant.
was actually got sponsored this a long time ago for one of my charity challenges. For friends at home, you can set the resistance on it for breathing in and breathing out. You don't use it when you're exercising. You do it more of a sort of, I don't know, a yogic like practice. And it's supposed to increase your lung strength and capacity, Anthony, would that be?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that would also be a very useful tool for anxiety, building resilience around anxiety too.
Yes. How would that help with anxiety? Because I'd imagine probably a lot of people listening would like to know more about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is actually I have a self-paced course on anxiety, which has just been going for about 8 years, and thousands of people have used it. The main essence of that course is that you need to learn to extend your exhale. And again, it's better practiced outside of the context of anxiety. So if you do it for 3 minutes every morning, 3 minutes every evening before you go to sleep, and after about 2 or 3 weeks, it becomes a natural way that you would greet any rise in tension at all. But the essence is to breathe in to a count of 4 through your nose, and then start with a count of 8 on your exhale, and then keep extending. So I now exhale for about 50 or 55 seconds, and then come to another inhale. But you really only have to get it up to 12 or 15, and already it's having a big effect on you. Actually, the trick here is the fact that you're deciding to do it is 50% of the work. So that's really the secret. If you're going to make the choice to do it, you're making a choice from a choiceless place. So you're already beginning the shift yourself. Again, it starts with that one breath. It all comes down to taking that breath when you don't want to.
And is it your uncle Nicola? I've
Yeah.
seen mentioned in your documentation.
Yeah.
Was a great philosopher.
He was. Yeah, he was. He was not just a great philosopher. He was a great man. He was a great patriarch and a beautiful man, very gentle soul. And he was, in fact, all the universities in Italy that teach philosophy, they use his books for their curriculum. And yeah, he's my great uncle. I never knew how much he'd informed me, but it definitely is a part of my work. I think to bridge between philosophy and spirituality and psychology is my dream, to see how all of these three can help each other. And I see in the past how they've all been a bit separate and even competitive with each other. But to join them together, I think, is really where the juice is. And
What's his surname, Anthony?
Abbagnano.
Okay. I'll just
A
see if I
double.
can.
Yeah, you'll find him on.
Yeah.
He's not on LinkedIn because he died a few years ago, but you'll find him on Wikipedia for sure.
Yes, there we go. It's coming up straight away. Yes,
Even look a bit like,
amazing.
yeah.
Anthony, thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there anything you'd like to add that maybe I've overlooked?
Yeah, if any of you are interested to try breathwork, please join us on Sundays. We do a breathwork on UK time at 9:30 and at 5 p.m. and it's online. I was the first person to bring breathwork online, and I think it's what's really made it available to millions of people. And our staff facilitators come and do it, and every once in a while I do one as well. And we theme it all on parts of the human journey, the inner journey. So you'll find it supportive. It's a half-hour experience with about another 15 minutes, 15 minutes before intro and 15 minutes outro. You'll get to breathe with other people. You'll get to understand that maybe some of the problems you face are not yours alone. And you'll get a whole lot of support. So there are several hundred that breathe every Sunday. Please join us. And I think my request is that I don't know how many people are going to download or listen to this podcast, but if each one of you would commit to a random act of kindness today, or even this week for the whole week, every day, that's going to make a huge wave of change. So that's what my ask would be as a result of being with you today.
Yes, and I'll back that up. Anthony, thanks so much for coming on the show. I hope that we can keep in touch.
Well, actually, I was saying that's two random acts of kindness. That's one for me and one for you. So that's where the balloons come.
Yes, thank you. Yes, they looked amazing, by the way. Yes. So what was I going to say? Yes, I hope we can keep in touch. And thank you for everything that you're doing. As I said, I was showing your book. I think everyone will be intrigued to read it now and find out more. We'll put your social media links and your website and everything below this video so people can find you. And yes, thank you very much again. Stay on the line, Auntie, just so I can thank you properly. And to all of our friends out there, I hope you've got as much out of this podcast as I have. Please look after yourself. If you can like and subscribe, that would be wonderful. As you know, we survive through our Patreon members and also channel members. So please consider supporting the podcast. And for those people that would like to support my upcoming climb of Mount Everest to shine a light for our struggling veterans, there'll be a link in the description box. Much love.